Plus One Forward, the podcast powered by the Apocalypse, where we talk about tabletop role-playing games using or inspired by the Apocalypse engine. I'm your MC Rich, and I'm joined by my guest, Fraser Simons of Samjoko Publishing. Hey Fraser, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Our normal thing is to ask you what the first game was, but you've been on before to talk about the Veil, so now, as a returning guest, I want to ask you a new one. What PBTA game, right now, do you most want to play, but you haven't yet?
For me, I think it's Ironsworn. It's I've been actually following it on G+ RIP for a while, and it looks really cool. I really like everything that he's done with it, and I haven't played a GM-less game in a very long time, actually.
It's a pretty fascinating tweak on PBTA, and hey, if you can't find anybody to play with, you can play it all by yourself, right?
Right.
Very cool. All right, well, we're going to jump on over and read a sitch now. Read a sitch. So, Fraser, you and I were talking ahead of time, trying to figure out what is a cool topic to discuss about things that are going on at our tables, and you were inspired by the game that we're going to talk about in a little bit.
So I was thinking about using one-shots in a continuing play culture. Initially, I was thinking of this in terms of World of Dungeons. People like to run series in the Gauntlet, and they kind of are loosely connected. And so I was thinking, what would the PBTA version of that be in a game state, like a whole game made to just do that? And so... I basically designed something that is meant to be a connective tissue between things that's really stripped down and is a new kind of way to play PBTA.
Now, you're talking about a series of one-shots. I've got experience in mini-series with the Gauntlet and folding them together into living campaigns. But you're talking about stringing together one-shots. That's interesting because... The first question I have is, are all of these one-shots meant for completely different player sets? Like every time you have a whole new crew of folks to sit down at the table with?
You can do both, actually. So the archetypes are like pretty loose, so you could apply it to the same character that you've played before, or you could make a new one. And people did both throughout play as we play tested each of these games, which is 9 games in one sort of anthology thing that I've put together.
Okay. What was the connective tissue, or what's the kind of connective tissue? For somebody who wants to do this on their own, maybe Uncanny Echoes or not, what do you think are the important parts to make sure are throughput throughout the multiple sessions?
So I made sure that all of them are sort of set in the same umbrella genre, basically. So it's not too far out there. It's all supernatural, urban fiction. So there is a plausible connection right there. And then I also make it so that it's all set in one sort of nebulous city that we don't really name. You could, I guess, as you were GMing or MCing it, do that, but we decided to just keep it like nebulous, so it could be any city that we're in. And then we just springboarded off of that, because each issue I pose a sort of question to the players. And by answering that, we then link it to what has previously been established in the fiction, and then that becomes our connective tissue. And then as we're playing it, we have like a ulterior motive, which is to sprinkle in uncanny echoes that are motifs that keep reoccurring from issue to issue to issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
I get it. Now we know why it's called that.
Yes.
How much setting needs to be carried? You said you've got the idea of a city and a motif and the idea of the genre, but are characters that are established in, say, game 1, 2, or 3, are these characters that you want to be bringing back in games 8 and 9, even though these are one-shots?
Sometimes, yeah. Like, for instance, the one that is free that anyone can download is the Heist one, and it's basically like if you were playing The Town, that popular movie with Ben Affleck, where they're all robbing a bank. It'd be like you being the bank robbers, except when you get to the vault, there's an uncanny thing inside of it. And then issue 2 suburbia could be where you're living in this small community and you've been affected by that. Like maybe one of the bank robbers lives in that community and they took this supernatural thing, and it's supposed to be kind of like a X-Files episode where these regular mundane community members are affected by this in some way, and you link it that way. And so in that case, you could definitely make a character where one of them was one of the previous bank robbers who is also a community member, or you could just have all new people affected by this thing, and both would radically alter your fictional outcome with the same kind of springboarding that everybody gets.
That's cool. I remember in the Star Wars Saturdays campaign that there was an NPC who was basically a barnacle. He was the cousin that the gunlugger in the Apocalypse World game that I ran on Tatooine. He was the cousin who kept getting in trouble and was kind of the screw up. And so the gunlugger kept getting drawn into jobs and eventually just paid to have him shipped away. Like, you can get off Tatooine. Here you go. Here's your ticket. Get the heck out of Dodge. And then that cousin ended up being the La Sposa, or the spouse, in the Hutt Cartel game that I ran. And we had the same player who played the gunlugger go over and then play the screw up cousin in a completely different role. And that was really fun. I liked seeing those uncanny echoes, if I were to borrow your term,
yeah,
of the character as I portrayed it as an NPC versus how Steven portrayed it as his character. Is that part of the fun of seeing that same character through different lenses, and you or someone else kind of picking up the ball and playing that character?
Yeah, I think so. There's like this meta narrative connective tissue thing is like a completely different satisfying effect than being like simulationist and playing the same character throughout it. Instead, you get like this sort of writer's room approach to it, and then you zoom into the characters, and because everybody knows it's a one-shot, they also do that like drive your characters like stolen cars thing where they just kind of go off the rails. They don't have to be too invested in the character, but since they're worried about the meta outcome of all of this stuff, they're not doing like way too crazy things that like aren't tonally appropriate and stuff like that as well.
I'm glad you touched on that, because that was one of the things I wanted to know about. How do you, with different groups stepping in, one-shot mentality, sometimes people are like, yeah, I'm going to kick down doors and blow off steam and do all this crazy stuff, and here are these moves where I shoot people in faces or drop anvils on them. I want to do that thing. How do you control that tone while still giving people the chance to experience the game and do stuff they want for their one shot?
So what I do in each of these issues, there is a 1 page of questions that they answer. There's 2 or 3, I think, that they answer as players before we start playing. And the first one is always, what tone do we want it to be? And then after they make characters, there's 2 or 3 other ones that get the players invested in the actual setting and what's happening.
Oh, cool. So it can vary in tone. You could have a very kind of slapstick one, and as long as you have the Uncanny Echoes, then later, a couple one-shots later, you've got something really dark and brooding, and it's still part of the meta-narrative. Is that
totally
what you end up with?
You got
okay.
it, yeah.
Cool. What were the biggest challenges that you faced trying to string all of this together?
Bloat, I think, is the strongest thing that I had to cut out, because I wanted, when I was looking around and seeing what people were playing and what the challenges they faced were to getting PBTA to the table, it was often like how complex it is and how they have to learn a specific genre. So instead I took that approach out the window, basically, and just cut everything down to exactly what they needed. It's like the most stripped down PBTA system that you could probably find. I don't want to claim that without really knowing, but I think it's pretty stripped down. There's keys from Lady Blackbird in it, and as you hit a key, you unlock a move, or you can use that as hold to do other stuff, namely to help other people. And other than that, that's basically like the only system stuff that drives it, and everything else is just hitting moves. So it's really light and mean, and I think it's very approachable, and people can either choose to just bang out a one shot, or they can do this meta hopping technique, and it should work fine either way that you choose to do it.
Okay. Well, we've already dipped into talking about the game, so let's go ahead and jump over and open our brain to Uncanny Echoes.
Open your brain.
You're on here talking about Uncanny Echoes. That was the inspiration for the discussion in Rita Sitch. Let's talk about it more specifically, Fraser. So, Uncanny Echoes, you've already mentioned that the setting is some kind of city that's not named. Tell us a little bit more about the city and what Uncanny Echoes is about.
Sure. Mostly how you will define it is built up through the one-shots that you choose. So I kind of make an outline in the book saying these are the really key, interesting points of every single issue, and how you play them and in what order is going to build out the setting. So right then and there, there's the only things that you have to latch on to is the specific trappings of that issue, and it ranges wildly. So people could go quite gonzo right away, or they could go very mundane. Like one of the issues is playing an old folks home person, and one of the people in there have gone missing, and you're just rolling around the old folks home trying to figure out what's going on. Inspired by Bubba Hotep. It's like yeah.
Nice. I like that inspiration.
Yeah, and then there's the heist one that I mentioned. There's the Suburbia one, which is kind of like an X-Files episode. So as you're playing each issue, you're kind of like zooming out and then zooming into different sections of the city and building it out and up. Other than that, there isn't really anything very defined at all by it.
Okay, cool. What are the mechanics in this game that are different from Apocalypse World?
Yeah, so I took clocks, which I guess it's still PBTA because the Sprawl had it, I think, before Blades in the Dark. But every single issue has clock structure. So if how long you want to play it is defined by how many segments of a clock that you make. And then as players succeed or fail, there are generally an opposing clock and a clock that the players work towards their progress on. And as complications arise, you tick one. As they succeed, you tick the other. And then you gauge the fiction in that way. So it's a pacing mechanic as well. And then, as I mentioned before, keys from Lady Blackbird, which is just sentences in which are like goalposting what the character is supposed to be there for and doing, the playbook. And as you hit those things, you choose what you want to do with it, but mostly it's there to unlock new moves. So as you're playing the character in the way that it's meant to be played, you get new moves, and then you ultimately get them all, and then you're just done. There's no more XP or anything like that. The way that it translates over to the next issue is sometimes whatever clock you're using can sometimes be translated to a new issue. So if the player's like got 3/4 of the way through the progress and actually failed, some of that progress can mean something in another issue if you connected it. But other than that, I think that's pretty much it.
Let's talk a little bit more about the clocks.
Sure.
Do the moves push ticks on the clock? Like if I succeed at my move, can I say I'm going to tick up the success clock a couple times? Or is it all fictional? Like I'm doing things with moves that are moving the world around, and once you as the MC say, oh, well, it sounds like we've moved up a couple ticks in the clock, and you get that much closer. Is it a direct move to clock, or is the clock more abstract?
It varies for issue. Most of the time it's just in the fiction. When you succeed towards your goal fictionally, then they make a tick on the clock because that's what you did in the fiction. Some moves I make it more or less abstract, I should say, where a basic move, for instance, will say when you do X, Y, Z, outcome is tick clock for the progress. And that's just when things are generally more abstract, and I'm not sure what kind of fiction people are going to be driving for. Like some of the very like magical realism type ones. There's one where you're essentially Imagineers. Have you heard of Imagineers before?
In Disney?
Yes, that's what it's from.
Yes. Okay, I was like, wait.
Yeah, so
he can't talk about Disney, can he? Okay, yeah, I guess he can.
Yeah, it's definitely from that. And so there are people, except I've combined them with people who are like kind of parkour people. So you're like these characters who parkour around the city. You get a job from a nebulous corporate place generally, and then you have to like doctor this area of the city in such a way that the corporateocracy kind of like tells you. And in situations like that where I'm not sure what the players are going to be imagining in the fiction, that's where the move is basically like, hey, when you make progress towards your ultimate goal of realizing this Imagineering, you tick the clock. Whereas other stuff, I trust people to just tick the clock as it makes sense in the fiction.
Are there moves to reduce the bad clock? Like, I'm going to take a couple ticks off the crap goes wrong clock.
Yep, there is too. For instance, in the heist, you can get heat as your clock. Like the cops are going to be on you, but some of the playbooks have moves where they can reduce it, and it's like things like calling in to make a distraction and other things like that. It can reduce the sort of tug of war clock there.
Neat. I like that. A little bit of an offensive move and a defensive move. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked a lot about moves. What's your favorite move from Uncanny Echoes and why?
My favorite move is just because it's fun. And it's from the Suburbia issue that I talked about before, which is a throwback to my childhood in X-Files episodes where Mulder and Scully had to live in Arcadia, this like house where weird stuff was happening and they had to get to the bottom of it. And it had the archetypical characters, and one of them is the nosy neighbor, which is exactly as you think. They're the person that knows everything about going on, and they're probably organizing the community search parties and neighborhood watch and all that kind of stuff. And the move is called Outreach. When someone tells you they will be in the neighborhood watch with you, no matter if they mean it or not, you may choose to appear in any scene they are in with or without clear explanation why. So it's just like you just pop up.
Hey, neighbor. Oh, let's see here. You got a gun. Oh, yeah. That sounds fun.
And
that is cool.
I like that the fictional justification first is you just coerce this person into joining the watch, and it doesn't matter if they even mean it or not. You're just like, got it, and then you can just show up.
Oh, that's great. That's a really neat move. I like that. No roll, just if you do this, you could trigger it anytime. Fun. All right. Well, Fraser, anything else about Uncanny Echoes that we haven't talked about you want to share?
I think maybe just that it's like the book that is now being sold. I think there might be some confusion about this, especially for patrons and stuff like that. But originally it was released as 9 separate issues that people can just buy. So you can go on drive-thru, and if you like the sound of a particular issue, you could just buy that. Whereas the book is kind of like an anthology collecting all of these issues, and then also gives a system background and how to play the PBTA and what kind of system I used for this and all of that kind of stuff. It compiles everything into one format that's cheaper than buying them all together and expounds on them, and also kind of streamlines all of these issues so that you can do this meta-narrative connective tissue thing a lot easier than what I was doing before, where it was just separate stuff that I would design monthly and release.
This is really fascinating, I have to say. I mean, I've got a personal bias towards the idea of playing with lots of different people and having a cohesive narrative rather than wipe it all away and start fresh in the next month. So this is neat. I really like it. Now, of course, it's a campaign, and so it doesn't feel right for us doing an AP. We'd only get one slice of it. So I just wanted to have you on to chat about Uncanny Echoes and to talk about that process. Thank you so much, Fraser, for sharing this. And Uncanny Echoes, like you said, it's on Sam Joko Publishing, right? Best place to get it?
You can get it there, and if you want a physical copy, you can get the print on demand on drive-thru.
Okay, drive-thru RPT. All right, we'll have links in the show notes. Thank you so much, Fraser, for coming on.
Thanks for inviting me.
+1 Forward is a production of the Gauntlet community, Richard Rogers and Rach Shelkey. You can find us at gauntlet-rpg.com or follow us on Twitter at +1FWD. If you would like to support our show, visit our Patreon site at patreon.com/gauntlet. The games mentioned on this show use the Apocalypse engine, which is a creation of Vincent and Magay Baker. The music for +1 Forward is from the Savage Aural Hotbed CD Gomi Daiko. The songs used are Gomi Daiko, Metal Version, and Drowning Attitude. You can find more amazing tunes by Savage Aural Hotbed on their website, www.savageauralhotbed.com.
Hi listeners, I want to tell you about the Gauntlet Patreon. The Gauntlet is one of the most active, vibrant communities in tabletop role-playing games. We produce podcasts, the Codex Zine, Gauntlet Hangouts, Gauntlet Con, and more. If you love small press, independent tabletop role-playing games, the Gauntlet is for you. And you can help keep things going by pledging to our Patreon. This year we have 4 different pledge levels for you to join at, each of which comes with a number of benefits. At the $2 level, you get early access to our actual play podcasts, including Pocket Size Play, as well as a special Keeper of the Gauntlet title. At the $5 level, you also get a PDF of our monthly zine, Codex. Your name and Keeper of the Gauntlet title is listed in the back of each issue of Codex while your pledge is active. At the $6 level, you also get access to the Gauntlet Slack group, which is the heart of our community. And at the $8 level, you get early RSVP access to new game events on Gauntlet Hangouts. The $8 spots are limited based off how many early access players we think the Gauntlet Hangouts calendar can support. Every month on the 15th, we will make a small number of new $8 spots available. So if you want to play games with the Gauntlet, make sure you keep an eye on our Patreon page around that time so you can grab one of those rare spots. Finally, every member of the Gauntlet Patreon, no matter the level they pledge at, gets to attend GauntletCon each year for free. GauntletCon is our incredible online gaming convention with over 200 game events and panels, competitions and prizes, and our bumpin' GauntletCon Discord server. Folks, we can't do all this awesome stuff without you, so go check out our page and please consider pledging. We're at patreon.com/gauntlet. Thanks.